This is We Bleed Orange and Black, the podcast for Halloween and horror lovers. Join us as we interview creators, discuss our favorite horrors, and share original spooky stories. I'm Jeff C. Carter, and this week we're talking with Josh Millican about his new book, Teleportasm. Joshua Millican is a horror expert, writer, author, actor, poet, and journalist. He served as the editor-in-chief of Dread Central from 2019 to 2021. His books include Deeper Than Hell, Septum, and his collected interviews, The Dreadful Years. His most recent projects include the novelization of Richard Elfman's cult film Forbidden Zone and his entry into the killer VHS series, Teleportasm. Welcome to the show, Josh.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jeff.
Icebreaker question. What is your favorite Halloween activity in Los Angeles?
I mean, just the trick-or-treating. I have a little boy. He's finally old enough to enjoy Halloween. He'll be 3 for this next one, and he just loves getting up in a costume and watching the other kids come by. So since having a kid, experiencing Halloween through his eyes is kind of my favorite Halloween activity.
Do you bundle him up like E.T. and plop him in a bike basket?
Not yet. I mean, so far it's whatever he wants because he doesn't really like being dressed in things that he doesn't find supremely comfortable. We didn't really make him do anything when he was 1. When he was 2, we had an outfit picked out for him that he decided not to wear. Instead, he walked around with a garbage can and called himself a robot.
Classics. I mean, those are throwbacks. I appreciate that. Did you grow up in Los Angeles?
I did, yeah. 3rd generation, actually. Los Angeles to the core. I did go to college at UC Santa Cruz in Northern California. And then I stuck around Northern California for a while after I graduated. I loved it up there. It's a completely different vibe and attitude, and came back a few years ago.
Santa Cruz is where they filmed Lost Boys.
Sure is. And I've been to the boardwalk a bunch of times. That bridge, it's actually over a little creek. You can't tell in the movie what it's over, but yeah, I love Lost Boys. I had seen it before I went there, and knowing that that's the town where I was going to be going to college was great. For all the freshmen, they have a drive-in movie night where they like show it on a big screen on the side of a dorm or something. It's really ingrained for the culture there.
I think you're really going to like living in Santa Carla.
Murder capital of the world. That's a nice introduction.
Yeah.
When I first visited Los Angeles, before I even moved there, I went to the beach in Santa Monica. I saw the pier, and I thought it was the pier from Lost Boys. I kind of freaked out. Eventually, I did my research, and I found out that Santa Cruz was the location. So when I got up there and I got to walk on the boardwalk and go into their year-round, creepy, busted-ass old haunted house, I was in heaven.
Yeah, and of course it got a whole second life with Us a few years ago. Yeah, it's a fun little place to go. You know, for horror fans, obviously, there's a connection to it, but it's also just fun. The beach there is great. It's pretty clean. Lots of great restaurants around. Santa Cruz is just such a fun town, and going to college there was some of the happiest times of my life.
Is it true that Santa Carla is the murder capital of the world?
If all the corpses buried around here was to stand up all at once, we'd have one hell of a population problem.
So, Josh, what got you into horror?
I've been into horror since I was a teenager. College, I kind of got off track. I was into music. I got into horror again when Netflix first hit the scene, when they put their huge streaming library online. That was a real game changer for me. Their library was humongous in the early days. It's not like it is now where all the movies are spread out on 5 different streaming services, and some you can't find in certain regions anymore. So in the mid 2000s, I was watching basically every horror movie ever made that was digitized, not only American films but foreign films and experimental films. I really loved New French Extremity. Just really loved it. Not only was I binging all these horror movies, but I loved talking about them. And so a friend said, talk about horror movies so much, you should start a blog. That's what I did. I started with a blog and started working for some sites and landed at Dread Central eventually.
Were you an analog guy? Were you ever trading in the VHS scene?
I am an analog guy in that, my love of horror was probably first ignited by walking down the horror aisle in a video store, looking at VHS tapes like Pumpkinhead and Chud and Fright Night. So it is very apropos that I'm now part of the Killer VHS series, which really harkens back to that vibe, including with the incredible artwork by Mark Volchek, who's done the first 3 Killer VHS book covers so far. Great artist, great series to be a part of. Analog horror is awesome.
On the VHS and analog throwback tip, you wrote a novelization of a cult film that also gets referenced in your book, Teleportasm. How did you land that deal? Were you always a massive fan of that movie?
I was working with Dread Central. We were out in Los Angeles covering the E3 convention. And Richard Elfman is a big fan of the site. And so he invited several of us to come out to his place for a barbecue. Now, if you ever get invited to go to a barbecue at Richard Elfman's house, you better accept or you're going to regret it for the rest of your life, because this isn't like a barbecue. It isn't even like a dinner. It's something completely unique. Not only is the entertainment and the company wonderful, Richard is a primitive gourmet. He cooks the most amazing barbecue, sometimes throwing meat directly into the fire on top of a hunk of wood. It's just insane. His beautiful wife, Anastasia Elfman, usually provides entertainment of the horror burlesque variety. So yeah, got to meet Richard Elfman. Was lucky enough to strike up what I hope he would agree is a genuine friendship. Over the years since then, we got closer and closer. We actually worked together on what will eventually become his biography. He honored me by allowing me to listen to his stories, ask him questions, and let him tell his tales. Everything from his youth in South Central LA to Forbidden Zone and Mystic Knights of the Oingo Boingo, and all the way into what he's doing now. He's enjoying a career renaissance. My first novel was released by Encyclopocalypse, and they have already carved out a niche for themselves in the novelization arena. They somehow came into the rights to a number of previously published novelizations. So they already had kind of a name for themselves in that arena. And they were looking to produce some new novelizations. And I just thought it would be fun as hell to do a novelization of Forbidden Zone, which sounds like an impossible task in and of itself. Anyone who's seen the Forbidden Zone knows that it's a surrealist and musical, and there are some elements that would not be considered appropriate in the 21st century.
So they got the rights to it, and then they found you, and like, oh, well, he already has a relationship. This is perfect.
Well, no, I worked it the other way around. I had published my first novel with Encyclopocalypse, and then I was like, hey, for the rights for Forbidden Zone, can I be the author for it? And they were like, sure. So I said, Richard, meet Encyclopocalypse, meet Richard. And that's how that deal came about. But Richard was also interested in meeting Encyclopocalypse because he has a novel that Encyclopocalypse released in late 2023. It's called The Schlemazel of Supreme.
Mm-hmm.
It's about it's a Jewish vampire tale that takes place in Eastern Europe. And you can get my first novel, Deeper Than Hell, and Richard's first novel, The Schlemazel of Supreme, on Encyclopocalypse's website or anywhere that books are sold. It was just one of my superpowers seems to be connecting good people with other good people. And introducing my friend Richard to my buddies at Encyclopocalypse started a much bigger friendship circle, and we all benefited.
Fantastic. So, Josh, I think we're ready to jump into Teleportasm.
Great.
Can you read us a back of the book summary?
4 friends unearth a unique VHS tape that, when viewed, causes short-distance teleportation with euphoric after effects. No one knows where it comes from or what the long-term side effects may be, but some will risk everything for just one more trip.
Beautiful. In the beginning, this book almost feels like an anthology or a collection of short stories that views this one sci-fi concept through all these different prisms. And then, like good sci-fi, it asks the question, and then what? If this is true, what else is true? And I love how you tease out all these different genre flavors from this idea of a VHS tape that makes you teleport and gets you high. The places this goes. I don't want to spoil anything.
I mean, we can tiptoe around things,
Okay.
I like teasing.
Okay.
So we can definitely tease.
You've got all these different things that you explore through this outlandish premise that become these amazing individual chapters. Murder tapes, creepypasta, Southern California grunge, jackass, drug culture, zombies, X-Files, mad science, Mandela effect. It goes so many places and it feels organic. You're hopping around with all these different characters and you think, oh, these are just one-offs that are going to get horribly, irreparably mutated and mutilated. But then you realize all these stories are connected. And you bring these characters back together over time. You deepen their relationships and you explore their characters. Can you set the novel up for us? Who do we meet?
It centers around a group of friends, Barry, Frankie, Snaps, and Lars. They're based kind of on me and my friends from college and those good old days. Yeah, they like to sit around and pass the bong around and just enjoy each other's company. Someone throws out the idea one day. Someone says, hey, you know what feels really good? And it starts a conversation. And then this guy, Lars, who's kind of the quiet one of the bunch, he says, actually, teleportation feels really good. Which, of course, is like hitting the brakes, needle drop. Everyone's like, what are you talking about? What kind of bullshit's this? And he says, no, it's absolutely true. They're like, well, if you're going to say it's true, we better see it for ourselves. They end up unearthing it. And the book is kind of like you said, it shows the consequences of this one night with these four friends. Their through story is rather short, but the book itself jumps into the future to show you the ramifications of this one seemingly insignificant night.
No disrespect to you and your friends. It starts off with these characters that you're like, okay, these are just sort of quick sketches of stoners, and this is horror, so they're just going to get killed. We're not really supposed to care. But it's just a time and place in their life as they get older and they deal with the consequences of this night. You actually flesh them out into characters and you bring them back into conflict with each other over and over again throughout the years. It's such an interesting technique that you use. But I feel like metaphorically, Teleportasm is a story about a group of friends who are changing, who are getting pulled apart by circumstances, or sometimes literally, and the struggles of staying together with that core group you had when you were kids.
That's absolutely it. The metaphor, the analogy is pretty clear if you look at it as a group of friends who split up because of drugs. And, they didn't split up because of cannabis, just enjoyed their lives as cannabis. I'm a big fan of cannabis. But yeah, I think in my life, there have been times where I've either lost relationships or, haven't been the best friend with my friends. It absolutely has to do with that. And if people get to the end of Teleportasm and think back on their friends and the people they used to hang out with who they don't anymore and maybe regret that, that's kind of the emotional hook to Teleportasm. It doesn't beat you over the head with it. It's good, gory fun, but it absolutely is supposed to take you back to those fun, free days of late teens and early 20s.
I love the idea of teleportation and mutation as a metaphor for your friends changing. Was that emotional core there from the outset, or did you find it through all these different stories?
No, I think it was there from the outset, and Teleportasm actually evolved quite a bit from my initial drafts. It was much more a story about one guy trying to reconnect with his best friend. And that plot then became kind of a subplot, and then it actually kind of cycled out altogether as what ultimately became Teleportasm solidified. I always knew that friendship was going to be a binder to it, whether it was a quest for friendship or just group of friends at its center.
As a horror expert, I'm sure the references in this book run deep. I feel like I caught more than a few. Were there any particular inspirations or touchstones for the book?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, wanted to make the obvious ones kind of explicit, and those would be The Fly, David Cronenberg, 1986. Because when you think about teleportation horror as subgenre of horror, it's very small. It's very niche. And the king of teleportation horror is The Fly. So I wanted to obviously pay tribute to that. And I do in a way that's very meta. It kicks off with a couple sitting on the couch watching The Fly. And then what they watch next has these crazy ramifications. The other one, I don't know if you've read The Stars, My Destination. I went looking for teleportation horror stories or sci-fi stories when I was doing my research. And The Stars, My Destination came up on a lot of lists that were like, the 10 best sci-fi books you've never heard of. This came out in the late 60s, early 70s era of sci-fi, same as like Bradbury and Asimov and stuff like that, but it never really broke through big by that. The Star's My Destination is about how in the future humans will evolve the ability to teleport. The chapter of Teleportasm called Knights of the Penumbra is very heavily based on The Star's My Destination. The main character of that book is named Gully Foyle. The character in my chapter is the CIA agent named Getty Foyle. Horror fans will definitely see The Fly. Sci-fi fans who read, who go deep, will definitely see The Star's My Destination. There are other Easter eggs here and there, call outs to other horror movies and teleportation mythos.
I was getting illusions or vibes of Stephen King's short story, The Jaunt.
Of course, that's another one of the pillars of the extremely small niche genre of teleportation horror. I think, and Mr. King, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think The Jaunt was inspired by The Star's My Destination.
Yeah, I do recall that is his response to the burgeoning field of teleportation horror.
The thing that's so scary about The Jaunt is the idea of something that seems instantaneous actually taking the physical equivalent of infinity, which is just a horrifying thing to reconcile, not just cognitive, but cosmic dissonance. It's incredibly terrifying. And yes, I tried to incorporate that thread. It comes up very late in the book. I don't think that's a spoiler.
It's a lot longer than you think.
Yeah.
God, that story is terrifying.
It sure is.
Were you a big X-Files fan? Because I feel like this pairs well with the X-Files.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It was one of the first mainstream shows that really did dip its toe into horror territory. This is before Walking Dead and American Horror Story and all that. So it was really pioneering, and it really did break a lot of barriers. There's one that the publisher and I called the X-Files chapter. People reading it will very easily identify the X-Files chapter. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of the X-Files. I love conspiracy theories. A lot of what I write in terms of fiction uses conspiracy theories and creepypasta as jumping off points.
When you came up with Teleportasm, were you like, I have 50 stories I want to tell? Or were you like, well, it's literally a story about jumping around, so I'm going to explore this through the structure of jumping around?
It just arrived there organically. Like I said, Teleportasm actually had a complete first draft that has been completely replaced. It's like that thing, if you have a boat, you replace one plank at a time. Is it the same boat?
The ship of Theseus.
Right, exactly. So the first draft of Teleportasm was a story that kind of just jumped between the 90s and the present. And it was much more of a focused story. And then when I kind of abandoned that idea, I really threw everything against the wall, like the bulletin board. Imagine a bulletin board being with like, okay, here are all the potential scenarios of having a VHS tape that causes short distance teleportation. This could happen, this could happen, this could happen, this could happen, this could happen. And Teleportasm was actually really slimmed down. There were at least 3 full chapters that Alan, the publisher, and I just decided to forego. Not just to keep the book slim, but to keep it that sharp. So there are elements of Teleportasm that may still emerge. Maybe we'll release them online or in a magazine. The world of Teleportasm is even bigger. It was just finding a way to weave them all together in a way that fit. And I think initially I wasn't even worried, like, okay, how is this going to tie back to this? I didn't even worry about it at first. I was just throwing everything against the wall. And then as I started paring it down, I came up with how would I tie up all these loose ends? Because it doesn't tie up every loose end. I think it shows that there were some loose ends that you didn't even realize were loose. There's still a lot of questions left unanswered. It was a very collaborative effort between Shortwave founder Alan Listupka and myself. And Teleportasm definitely benefits from it.
Did you get a chance to see Laura Gislason's novella Inside Out?
They were a beta reader for Teleportasm, actually. So they had a little finger in the goop, if you will, of Teleportasm.
That's so funny because I interviewed Lore and I got to read their book, which is if this body melt is true, what else is true? And you see all these different variations and you realize it's all spinning out of this one theme. And then I recently had Lore back on the show and I was like, oh man, I just read this book, Teleportasm. It was giving me big Inside Out vibes.
Right on.
So I'm glad that circle has been closed.
Absolutely. Lore's great.
Yeah.
Cheers to Lore.
Cheers to Lore. So as an Angelino, I really enjoyed the deep cut Southern California flavor. Were you making it a point to put different places in, or was this just stuff from your everyday life?
A little column A, little column B. You know, I decided to give it a location just because I think when you do that, even if you don't personally have a connection to that area, it adds an authenticity. If you're from LA, like me, you've been out to the Valley a bunch of times and you know how the Valley is intrinsically part of LA, but it has such a different flavor. I never lived in the Valley, but my parents grew up in the Valley and my grandparents lived in the Valley. I used to always go and visit them, you know, summers in the Valley. So rather than setting it in my hometown, which I feel like I've done to death, I just set it over the hill in the Valley. And then I decided to kind of spiral outwards from there. Teleportasm seems to be kind of like a localized phenomenon until you get into the deeper chapters where it revealed that it's actually not just a global, but a universal phenomenon. I think the Valley's a place that just has its own vibe. It's a place that's, you know, very suburban, but also just has all the same bullshit as Big Brother LA.
And it's fitting because so many murder tapes, literally and figuratively, have come out of the Valley. That's where so many of the film studios are.
Right, exactly.
Are there any local monsters or figures of legend in LA that people outside of LA wouldn't be aware of?
There was a creepy story that came from UC Santa Cruz. They're on-campus apartments. They're set up in these weird configurations where there are a couple double rooms and then a bunch of single rooms all lined up with each other, and they would share a combined kitchen, bathroom, shower area. So there are these 7 kids living together, and one of their roommates is just really reclusive. He's in one of the single rooms, and he's hardly ever seen coming in and out. And when he does, he's really standoffish, doesn't want to connect with anyone. He spends a lot of time alone, just in his room. They're not even sure he goes to classes. Eventually, a smell, you know, starts to come out, starts to make them a little uncomfortable. He doesn't even leave during Christmas break. When his housemates come back after the break, it smells even worse. Finally, they have to intervene. You know, it's like, what's going on? Is this guy even taking classes? So they go into his room and discover that he has built a nest, and he has been sleeping, living, existing inside this huge nest. And it included a lot of food waste and along with several dead birds. That was kind of the lesser known urban legend around UC Santa Cruz. I've thought about working it into a future work. So, you know, TM trademark, Josh Millican copyright circle, if you're listening.
I'll send a copy of this file to the Library of Congress. Don't worry.
Yes, please do. And thank you.
Awesome. So what projects are you working on next?
Well, I have another novelization that's coming out in November. It's a novelization for Circus of the Dead, written and directed by Bloody Bill Pawn, about a crew of sadistic clowns. And it's a nice foil to films like Terrifier that feature a crazy iconic clown that's very supernatural. Because the clowns in Circus of the Dead are human, but no less terrifying than your supernatural Art the Clowns and Pennywise the Clowns and whatnot. So that'll be coming out in November. I'm excited about that. But before then, I'm going to have a signing for Teleportasm at Dark Delicacies in Burbank in the Valley, fittingly. That'll be on July 21st. And you can pre-order your autographed copy on their website, Dark Delicacies. I'm also going to be leading a couple panels at Midsummer Scream. Midsummer Scream's taking place July 26th through 28th in Long Beach. And I will be leading a panel discussion on artificial intelligence, AI. So we're going to include a few people in film and an actual AI expert. I'll also be leading a workshop on the art of novelizations with my buddies from Encyclopocalypse. Otherwise, follow me on Twitter or Instagram. Twitter, it's at Josh_Millican. Instagram, it's at Joshua_Millican. I'd really like to get to know you, and I'd really like you to read Teleportasm.
I second that recommendation because Teleportasm was a trip.
Side effects may vary.
Josh, thanks for hanging out with us.
Hey, thank you. I really appreciate it, and I love that you've really connected with it.
Please subscribe and follow. Links are in the show notes. You can find me at jeffccarter.com and hit the link to pick up my collection, We Bleed Orange and Black, 31 fun-sized tales for Halloween. Until next time, stay spooktacular.
One thing about living in Santa Carla I never could stomach. All the damn vampires.